Just from the title of this video alone, I bet a lot of you know exactly what I'm about to talk about. I finally finished watching The Sopranos. Yep. I really fell in love with this show over the last 2 or so months since I started this journey. I know I'm over 2 decades late to the hype here, but man, this show was special. And it's aged really well. Except for, the shooting. Like, anything with guns is a little wacky where they're, punching with the guns, but that's kind of a product of its time and it's got its own little special charm there. But overall, I think this show is still a masterpiece. I'm not gonna sugarcoat this take here, goofy goobers. That finale, pew! That is a super stinker. That is some turbo steamy ass right there. And I know it's a contentious topic because there are some people that absolutely hate the finale, like this guy right here, a guy who does have the makings of a varsity athlete. I played the highest level high school basketball the state had to offer. And then there's some people that find the ending brilliant. And you know what? That's fine. It's okay that we have different opinions on it. If you find the Sopranos ending to be terrific, just a tremendous triumph in cinema, all power to you. It's not a crime to have bad taste. There's people out there that defend Megalopolis. You know, it is what it is. I'm only pulling your leg. I am not the fun police here. If you like the ending, I don't think you have bad taste for it. In fact, I actually do think there is a lot to like about the ending. I think ambiguous endings can hit very hard, and of course, by their nature, they're going to be divisive. It's just certain things about this one, for me personally, I just don't think we're hitting. It was kind of shitting, unfortunately. But we'll get into the actual ZD of that in a moment. I want to just give you my full thoughts on this show in its entirety. Now, I don't think it's a perfect show. And even setting aside the ending, I do have some gripes with it. I don't think it's a perfect show. I wouldn't put it up there with what I consider to be the best television, Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, but it's not far off from it either. Now, a handful of weeks ago, I did do a video kind of giving you my thoughts, in progress of watching all of it. I think I was about 4 seasons deep at the time, so I was still swimming around in the womb here and hadn't fully finished it, but now that I have, a lot of my complaints, they did get better as the show went on, specifically AJ. He is still my least favorite character in the show. He is legitimately useless for 6 seasons, and now in the 6th season, he finally got some things to do, and we can see where his character has led. And his character had been established clearly through 6 seasons of his parents constantly just ignoring him, and basically every single line of dialogue he would have was, well, I don't know. And then his parents would be like, go to your fucking room, AJ. That was the song and dance for 6 seasons, and he would sometimes occasionally lash out with vandalism, and it was showcasing how terrible the family environment was and how he was being raised so poorly. So in season 6, we start to see just how directionless he is and confused and what he wants to do in life and shit like that. But he still ultimately has no role to play in this show other than just being like a bump on a log. But season 6, they did actually give him screen time and a little bit of writing beyond him just saying, I don't know, and then just having him fucking banished to the Shadow Realm by every single human being around him. He did get more to do, but it still doesn't really lead to anything. He does have, I was going to talk around spoilers, but this show's over 20 years old. I think it's probably fine to talk about spoilers, right? It felt like AJ was just this pincushion where writers would throw darts at a dartboard and land on an idea and have AJ do that for 5 minutes of an episode, and then it's completely forgotten. So where he had that motivation to kill Junior as revenge for Junior shooting his father, I thought that would lead to something, but it was kind of just self-contained to 1 or 2 episodes. It's a side quest, a little tidbit. Even his suicide attempt, which I thought was going to be a really huge thing that would kind of change the whole family dynamic in the world around him, didn't really lead to anything. So even though AJ did do more in season 6, it still ultimately doesn't have an effect on anything there. So yeah, overall, I'm not really an AJ enthusiast, but I do think that by the end of the show, he is a character that finally got somewhere, which I was starting to doubt would even happen. But it's not, again, that's not even a huge complaint, by the way, because it's a character that doesn't really have a huge presence in the show to begin with, unfortunately. It's actually pretty sad. The show, I don't want to just harp on negatives, because I don't really have a lot of negatives about the show. I think this is just masterful character writing across the board. I think Tony Soprano is the most interesting character ever written, full stop. The acting, holy shit. And this is coming from a guy who saved the Hunger Games franchise with my performance in the Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 1. Tony Soprano, he makes me look like an amateur, if you can believe that. It is such a great character. The way he's able to convey so much through just breathing. Like, by the time this show wrapped up, I felt like I knew what Tony's, like, whole, like, speech was going to be, or everything he was feeling, just by the way he was breathing in the scene. Like, he conveys so much. He is menacing. He is, at times, very vulnerable. And you get to see so many different sides of him. He is so fleshed out and so complicated, with just an absolute masterclass in acting from Jim Gandolfini. Unbelievable work. And it's a character, once again, that is just downright rotten. Tony Soprano is a character you can never actually root for. You follow a scumbag, and they're not shy about letting you see it. And it's something that I think is so special about this show. I really appreciate that they don't pull any punches. There is nothing Weenie Hut Jr. about this show. They show heinous things to let you know that these characters you are following, they're bad people. And even when you're following our main character, Tony, and you're seeing him do deplorable, unforgivable things, beating women, killing people that do not deserve it, like all kinds of awful things, you still follow this character and even at times empathize with what's happening to them. But never to a point where you want to see them succeed and you root for them. They do such an incredible balancing act of making you follow this awful piece of shit, but making you still get invested and care about what is happening and where it's going with them. And it's not just Tony that gets this treatment, it's really every character. Another standout is Chrissy, Moltisanti. Chrissy is a character that is kind of irredeemable. Even though there's glimmers where there seems to be like a path for Chris to follow to be redeemed, he never actually takes it. But it never feels like it's just like, you know, out of character for him to just turn away something that could change his life and make him a happier person. It showcases just how deep he is in this world and the mind control and just like by the fucking nipples Tony has him, he cannot defy him. And it leads to his death, which I don't know if this was controversial with the Chris death. I actually thought it was handled really well and made a lot of sense. It once again drives home just what a fucking bad person Tony is. Chris gave up everything in his life for Tony, and he's not stupid to that fact. He knows it. And now he has a wife and kid, and he's tried to get clean multiple times, but Tony keeps poking that bear. People keep making fun of Chris for his sobriety, and he eventually does relapse. And then on the drive home, Chris is high, gets into an accident with Tony. Tony notices that the baby seat is demolished. Chris is in a rough spot, and he mentions that he won't pass a drug test. Tony then kills Chris because of it. And you feel bad for Chris, but then you remember Chris is also a piece of shit. Just before this, he had shot and killed one of his friends, just fucking point blank executed this guy because his friend didn't want to listen to him whining about how people were making fun of him. He didn't want to hear him vent and rant. So then Chris just kills him in cold blood, and it's something Chris has done before. So you still like feel really emotionally invested in these absolutely horrible people. The show does an unbelievable job with this writing, because ordinarily you'd see a character like Chris and you can't wait for them to die, but they give you so much depth to this character. And it's the same for Tony. Like in that moment, everyone hates Tony, but you're still going to follow him and you still get emotionally invested in what happens. I can't praise the writing enough. Every character in this show gets this level of attention, really. At least, like, the main characters you see around. Like, the conversations with Dr. Melfi, the therapy sessions with her and Tony, absolutely brilliant as well, seeing that side of him. It's just, I cannot glaze the writing in this show enough. I think the writing is so smart, and I actually like their decision to just leave things unfinished sometimes. Not in regards to the ending. I'll get into that a little bit later. But there are episodes where, like the Russian through the forest, where Paulie and Chris, they're chasing a Russian after a botched money collection goes awry because of Paulie's temper. Well, they end up in this huge chase in the fucking freezing cold snow, chasing a Russian. They end up like shooting him in the head, but it doesn't kill him, and he somehow continues running, and then they lose him. They spend the whole episode just wandering the woods, about to fucking die from hypothermia, and they never find that Russian, and it is never even mentioned again. Well, that's not true. They do mention it like once or twice in passing, but never, there's no closure. You, as the viewer, do not know what happens to that Russian. Did he die? Did he get away and go back to his boss and tell him what happened? I think that's kind of unlikely because there would have been repercussions for that. So I don't think that's the case, but you don't know for sure. They don't show you and they don't tell you. I actually like that decision because it's kind of realistic. Not everything in life gets an answer. That's the sad fucking reality of it. That's the cold water of it. Not everything gets closure. And I think it's a really cool thing to be expressing in a show like this because it is really realistic. This show feels so grounded. It does make sense that not everything's going to have like a pretty bow on it where you know where it went and what happened to them. There are so many plot lines that were kind of self-contained in an episode that never had a resolution. And it's something I've just never seen in any other show, ever. It takes a lot of gall to make that decision. And I thought it worked really well in Sopranos. I really do think this show is a top 10 show of all time. But like I said, it is not a perfect show. There are things about it that I didn't like all that much. I did make a mention in my last video when I was 4 seasons deep that there is something that I felt was a little excessive, but it's not really a complaint and it's not that big a deal. It's how every single conversation in this show that lasts longer than 2 minutes leads to like this explosion of emotions and anger. If there is 2 characters talking, or even just a group of characters talking, and this scene goes longer than like 2 minutes, I know someone is in trouble. Someone is in jeopardy because there is going to be fucking fury. Just going ballistic all the time. It's every character too. Like, it makes a lot of sense for everyone in the Soprano family and everyone in the underworld to be like that, but it's literally every character. Fucking pastry chef. If you say, hey, can I get like an extra pastry? You know he's about to just start fucking throwing cleavers at you or something. Like, oh my god. And jokes? Holy shit. Jokes are death sentences. Anytime someone says, I'm just breaking balls, you know a character's death has just been set in motion, or there is a fight that is immediately going to follow. There is not a single scene where a joke gets told where someone makes it out alive or makes it out without scars. Every joke that gets told in the show leads to someone getting beat up, like absolutely their ass beat, whooped out of this world, or just straight up killed. So I just said that it felt like it was a little excessive how every single character is like that, even the ones that aren't even tied to like the dirty dealings in the underworld. It just felt like every single fucking character was one dialogue tree option away from the biggest fucking blow up you've ever heard. But it's not that big of an issue. It's not like I have a huge complaint about it. It's just something I made a mention of. Something I did legitimately have a real complaint with, specifically in Season 6, is their over-reliance on the same story beats. And what do I mean by that? In Season 6, basically everyone's a fucking informant. Literally, like, every character turns out to be an informant, or they're flipping. Like, they used that so many times, and it just felt so cheap. Like, it just felt like a cop-out. Oh, it turns out that guy was a rat, which is why now our cast is in a tough pickle all of a sudden. And they'll use it for characters that you've never even really seen before. For example, these are big rats, actually. There's a character named Jimmy Petriel. Turns out, big rat, informant, and he squeals. Johnny Sack goes to jail because of it, and it causes a lot of problems. But the thing is, you don't know Jimmy, because I looked it up. Jimmy only makes very short appearances across 5 episodes in the entire show. Like, he is actually only visible in a handful of scenes, yet it turns out he is this crucial rat, this huge informant that has a massive effect on the story direction. Like, that just feels underwhelming because you don't know Jimmy. Like, Tony Soprano even had to say, like, when he found out, he's like, Jimmy, he's a sweet old guy. Trying to remind you, like, who that even is, because you're probably confused. It's a name you haven't really heard, and you definitely couldn't put a face to that name. And it happens multiple times. There's another rat. His name is Ray. And Ray, Like, he's a higher up. Like, this guy's, he's big business in this world, and people really respect him, but you don't see him, you don't hear about him, except for like one episode, and you get like little tiddlywinks of him talking to the police throughout, but you've never actually seen him interact with anyone, yet he has these really crucial, incriminating tapes of the cast, but you don't know Ray. And you only really know him by name in one episode, and he dies, like, in that episode. He just randomly dies in the car giving a tape to the FBI. Which is another one of my complaints, how this show just uses spontaneous deaths in order to progress things. Like, it just feels so lazy, because it happens all the time. Like, it's not even shocking. It was more shocking that a character didn't just fucking spontaneous combust by the end of the show. And they use it for characters out of nowhere, just seemingly at random. Like, Hesh's girlfriend. She just randomly dies while in bed when Hesh goes up to take a pee. Like, he goes and tinkles, comes back, and his girlfriend's dead. And that is never even addressed again. Like, it just randomly happens, and you only met that girlfriend, like, maybe twice in the entirety of the show. It's just a weird decision to do that. Like, it'd make more sense if it was, mafia guys just getting clipped, just randomly they get killed. That makes sense, but that's not what happens. I mean, it happens sometimes. But, like, characters will just have a random health episode that just spawns out and just kills them. Just immediately kills them. It's just so odd how often that happened. Like, how many times they used that. And while it happened more towards the end of the show, it was kind of present throughout. I think is kind of just like this, subverting your expectations tool that I just don't really think landed all that well. Like, even early on where that guy died pooping, he just died on the shitter randomly. It really just started to feel like they were using it as a tool solely to subvert your expectations, so that way you wouldn't be able to guess what the fate of these characters would be. But in doing it so many times, it just made it feel like it wasn't subverting expectations anymore. I was now just expecting it all the time. Like, I expected every conversation at the Bing to start with someone being like, "Hey, you remember Billy? Yeah, that poor prick, he fucking slipped on a banana peel and landed on an ice pick. Yeah, he's dead now. His wake's coming up in a couple weeks. Terrible, really terrible stuff." Like, it's just, it's not the biggest complaint in the world, I suppose, but they did it too many times with, like, these random instant deaths that weren't even tied to anything in, like, the underworld. It was just like, this character, they just got their name written in the death note. Like, I honestly, that would have been a crazy twist if it turned out, like, Phil's crew just had the death note the whole time, so they were picking others off using that. Because that is how it fucking felt sometimes towards the end of the show. Anyway, those are my only complaints about the show leading up to its finale. I want to make it clear. I think this is an absolutely incredible show that is a must-watch. And now let's get to the finale. I don't like it. I do not like Green Eggs and Ham. I am sorry to say. It was not well done. I do not mind ambiguous endings. I think they can hit, they can be memorable, they can be fun to play with, because it makes you as the viewer have to think really hard about what it means and come up with your own theory on what happened next and where it went. But in this case, I just think it doesn't set it up well, and it is abrupt for the sake of, like, once again, being unexpected. So if you don't know how it ends, Tony gets Phil killed, who was hunting Tony down and killing his upper level guys. Tony wins there, but then turns out one of his guys might have flipped, and he's looking at an indictment. So he doesn't get to breathe a sigh of relief or anything, because he's immediately back in a tough spot. But he wants to go to dinner with his family. So they make plans to go to this restaurant. Tony gets to the restaurant first. He puts on a nice song, and then his family starts entering one by one. Carm shows up first. He's excited to see her, but he starts to take notice of some shady people around. And it's getting a little tense. Even though the music is relaxing and we're still seeing, like, some other patrons in the diner, there's still this air of, like, oh, something's about to pop off. Carm gets there. The two are talking. AJ shows up next. And AJ and Tony's relationship has been terrible forever. But they're kind of mending it now, and Tony's smiling. AJ even seems, a little less uneasy around his parents. And he takes notice, once again, of a shady guy who's sitting around them and looking back at Tony. Kind of fishy behavior there. It looks like he could be there as a dangerous individual to cause harm to Tony. But Tony killed Phil, who was like the main threat, so you kind of don't really buy into that because who'd put the hit out on Tony now? There's really no one else that would do that except for maybe one of the other higher-ups that was with Phil's crew, even though they weren't on Phil's side. They even had like a sit-down and everything, so you're left to wonder, well, is this guy even really a threat? Because why would he be? Who would even be there to try and kill Tony? But the guy, like Tony takes notice, the guy goes to the bathroom. And then Tony's daughter walks in. And the second she opens that door, the music cuts and the screen immediately cuts to black. And it looks like we see Tony look at something. It looks like Tony might have seen something shocking, but we don't know because it immediately cuts to black abruptly and it just ends. It looks like your TV lost power. Like it actually just looks like your TV turned itself off. That is the end of The Sopranos. So you don't know, did anything even happen? Did Tony get killed there? Maybe nothing happened, but it does lead you to believe that, yeah, it looks like Tony probably got killed right then and there. Now, of course, this leads everyone to start wondering what the fuck happened. And the creator, David Chase, he's been pretty tight-lipped about it, though he's kind of insinuated Tony dies there through saying things like, oh, I had this whole death scene planned out. Oh, you're talking about the death scene, and then goes on to talk about it. So, like, he's kind of tiptoed around it, and he kind of, like, makes it almost like a joke about that. So it seems like he's implying Tony dies there, but there is nothing in the actual episode that leads you one way or the other than his expression. It seems like he probably did die there, and my problem with that ending is that it is so abrupt, there's nothing to really chew on there. And there's, of course, as was normal with the show, plot lines that were still developing and not concluded, which I don't really have an issue with, but in this case, if you're going to make it an ambiguous ending, there needs to be something that gives viewers something to go off of, other than just like a random guy who might be there as a threat to Tony. Like I said, there's really not a whole lot of people you can point the finger at and be like, yeah, that guy would want Tony dead and probably did something about it. Because it's a guy you haven't seen before. It's not like a familiar face or anything, so you don't know who he's associated with or anything. And if you're really thinking of associations, there's really no one that pops into mind right away. I just don't think there was enough here to make it like an effective, ambiguous ending. It's just like, okay, it's over, done deal, and that's it without anything more there. Like, no more meat on its bones. I just think it feels so fucking flat. Now, I've read a decent chunk of interviews, as well as just reading some theories people have on it, and there's one that stood out to me. He said that he found it disgusting that viewers were expecting to see, like, this big comeuppance with Tony's brains being blasted out, like this huge bloody ending where Tony finally gets what's coming to him. And he spends the last little bits of this episode playing with tension, where his daughter's trying to park the car, and it's just like a very trivial thing, but it's like being drawn out, and it's kind of tense because like, oh, what's going to happen? Is she just going to get fucking killed going into the diner or something? Like, what's going on? So he's like building this tension, and then it leads to just that black screen, and you don't get anything. And I think one of the quotes was "TV's off." So I think probably what the idea was we don't know if he was killed or if he continued to live, whatever. But the idea was just show's done, show's over, and once again, just a moment of, you didn't see that coming, did you? It feels like that was kind of the whole idea. Like, that's kind of the impression I get, because again, there's really nothing in the episode itself that would even lead you down a path to have you play with the ambiguity at the end here. You just don't get, like, anything. The only other thing I saw that does kind of make some sense, at least in terms of like what happened, like Tony's fate, the cut to black is actually kind of important because earlier on it's mentioned, I think it was by AJ, who said that he envisioned like black to represent death in a sense like this. And we had seen throughout the show, like when Tony was coming out of his coma, the screen would cut to white. So I believe the explanation given was that since it cuts to black, the assumption is he did die there. And that's where it ends. Which I think that could be the case. But again, I still feel like it's not a very good finale because you don't know why or like where, like you can't even really play with that. All you can know maybe with some level of confidence is that he dies there. I don't know. I just don't feel like the ambiguity worked for the Sopranos ending. At least not for me, it didn't. Now I know there were references throughout the show where Tony talks about like a couple other characters also talk about it, like how they'll just kill people who never even see it coming. They never even know why. They don't even know what hits them. And I guess the same could be said for this ending here. Tony dies there, never even knows why, never even knows who did it and what for, that kind of thing. So it could be a callback and tie into that. But even in that case, again, I still just don't think the ending hits that hard. It just feels disappointing. So I still think the show is a masterpiece. I just don't love the ending. It's that simple. And there was a couple things that I thought were a little odd throughout it, but nothing that I think is like a major negative as a huge critique I can have for the show. I think the show is 100% still a must-watch show. It is fucking special. So yeah, I'm really glad I watched The Sopranos, and now I want to go back and watch some of the other classics that I've missed. So that's really about it. So yeah.